Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in the clown decade. And today we are covering a topic that I thought was getting ever so slightly better, but it turns out no, this is the clown decade, and therefore everything has to get worse. What am I talking about? Well, from the title you should know, but what I'm specifically referring to is this particular thing I said in the last video I made on End UK Private Jets. Because that's the day when they are planning an Occupy Westminster demonstration. This is probably going to be something akin to the citywide shutdowns that Extinction Rebellion did for about half a year, and which stopped happening because there were absolutely no results coming from it, apart from people being arrested and people got bored. Same thing will happen here. They get smaller every time at least. That's the good thing about this. Yes, that was a bit of Haryanception. That was indeed a clip from within a clip from one of my old videos. I say old, I made it about a week ago. But me being me, I then had to jump the gun a bit and say this in the actual video. Anyway, turns out I was essentially right about Just Stop Oil. On October the 1st, they just had this to say: the occupation of Westminster will continue throughout the rest of the month. It's not just a day trip. Meet tomorrow 11 AM at Euston, Paddington and Waterloo stations. Look for Just Stop Oil banners out front. And this is what the scenes were like. A very slow and boring march down Westminster, past Downing Street, with a lot of people shouting Just Stop Oil. Now, were the climate cultists gentlemanly and polite, and did they stop at that? No, they didn't, which is why I'm making this video today. No, they had to go ahead and stop gluing themselves to lorries of cooking oil and effectively emulate the classic style of protest and block main roads throughout London again. On the 11th of October, 10 days after Occupy Westminster started, Just Stop Oil came out with this tweet: Dear Metropolitan Police, we are going to continue escalating our actions until our demand of no new oil and gas is met. Yours truly, Just Stop Oil. And they weren't kidding, because they are once again blocking roads.
Got no better to do, get job! You months! Punishing us, we're just the fucking workers, the clowns! Fucking idiots! You just sit there like a bunch of lemons!
Yes, they have blocked off the Knightsbridge and Brompton Road, which is a major road that is just behind Buckingham Palace and quite a busy and heavily congested road through London that is obviously quite important for not only private vehicles to get through, but as you can see here, also public service vehicles to stop the City of London being a huge dump. And Just Stop Oil gave further information. Breaking, Knightsbridge and Brompton Road blocked. At 10 AM, 32 supporters of Just Stop Oil established 3 roadblocks on Knightsbridge and Brompton Road, stopping traffic in either direction. Some have glued on, all are expected to be arrested. Now, personally, when it comes to people blocking roads, and especially when they glue their hands down, it's very rare that I say a sentence like this, but I really think we need to emulate the French.
Hop. Vous voyez, c'est pas trop collé, c'est du goudron. Ça colle pas, monsieur, c'est bon. Solide, hein.
Ah, maman! Ah!
Oui.
Ah! Ah! C'est super mal! Ah, t'es ouf! Ah!
Y'a rien, y'a rien.
Ah!
Yep, this is entirely self-inflicted harm. Traffic needs to get moving. If you're going to be stupid enough to superglue yourself to anything, this is part of the consequences. And though my French isn't up to scratch, all I can assume there was the man screaming in pain, saying, "Why have you done this to me? It really hurts," and the policeman just replying, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." Mad respect for that type of police work, I have to say. Unfortunately, about 3 hours after this roadblock had been implemented by Just Stop Oil, nothing appeared to have been done, and members of the public, naturally, were doing their best to try and alleviate the traffic and obviously help the situation. I mean, this is just a real-life rendition of the Virgin versus Chad meme. The Virgin roadblockers versus the Chad physically remove problems. And even as the guy's slowly walking back, thinking he's Gandhi or something, the man just gets back in his car, carries on with his day, because he's not got time for this. And wouldn't you love to see it when they get back down? Oh, what's this coming down the road again? Another white van. Does he care about these people or their massive, salacious course? Do you think he's going to stop, come out and say, "Oh, congratulations, I'm very happy you're doing this"? No. No, he gets out, is your typical, really pissed off white van man, and yeah, as you can see, the Chad physically removed the problem. And I have absolutely no issues with this man doing it. If someone is in his way, in the middle of traffic, trying to cause a stirrup, why would you stand for it? He's doing everything he needs to, and he's the only one doing it while the rest of the crowd reacts, but I don't really know why people don't get more involved in removing these people. I mean, technically you can't actually citizens arrest these people, because this is classed as a traffic offence, and traffic offences aren't indictable offences, they are just summary offences, so you're not legally allowed to citizens arrest them, even though it is clearly the right thing to do. Because look, every time they're getting moved out of the way, they're just going straight back. They are trying to be arrested, so just do away with it, just get out of the way, just let people arrest them, because that's what they want. And naturally, because it was 3 major roads being blocked in central London, emergency services couldn't get through these blockades. Yes, that is a fire engine waiting to get through the Just Stop Oil blockade. It's got its sirens on, it is probably heading to an emergency. However, Just Stop Oil tweeted out that Just Stop Oil supporters pause roadblock to let fire engine through with this little clip. You'll notice Just Stop Oil only have 11 seconds, and it is just as the fire engine's going through. Keen-eyed viewers will also notice there is a lot of police around. Now, why would Just Stop Oil only show a clip just as the fire engine's going through, rather than of their own supporters willingly moving for the fire truck? It's probably because it was actually the police getting involved that allowed the fire truck to get through. Yes, here's the police as they opened up the lane and started talking to the other people blocking the road, asking them to move out the way rather than arresting them, because apparently there are things they have to do first, which was a statement from the police that was left probably purposefully vague. But anyway, apparently they have to do some procedures first before they can actually start making arrests. And this video was posted half an hour after they started the roadblock. So I suppose at least the police were there, but they're not doing anything, so what's the point in having them? And as is quite common for me to report when these events happen, fire engines weren't the only emergency services being stopped in this blockade. Yes, yet again, the roadblocks are stopping ambulances from getting through. People are at risk of dying or having their ailments get much worse in a time when ambulances are already very scarce. Do these people care? Absolutely not. They are following the one true British cultist of the climate cult. And let's not forget what he said about blocking ambulances.
What would you do in this situation if it was not an Insulate Britain protest, but a Roger Hallam protest? In that circumstance, what would you do?
I'd stay there.
You would?
Yeah.
And if it were an ambulance and there was someone that could potentially die in there, would you stay there?
Yeah.
I did a whole other video covering the entire podcast, and Mike Goldsworthy there really does try and push him back from this ridiculous position of, yes, I would allow people to die for my cause. And it was such an embarrassing moment that ended up being the one and only podcast that Mike Goldsworthy ever did. That is how bad Roger Hallam is now. He can't come into the limelight again because of this, and because he said the Holocaust was, quote, just another human genocide. Which obviously, if you're trying to keep good optics, you don't do either of those things. But yes, it is still the person that inspired Extinction Rebellion and every other climate cultism offshoot. So of course it's his ideas, and like the one here, yes, keep blocking ambulances, that they are going to be following. Anyway, eventually arrests were made, and this is what people had to say who were being arrested.
We need to get in the streets. We're running out of time. This is coming from the UN General Secretary, among others. Yes, Just Stop Oil.
I mean, it's a classic thing that they always say, oh, these international bodies keep saying that we're going to all die, while they oversee other countries like India and China, whose carbon emissions are going through the roof at the moment, and I do mean that. But really, I'm just showing you, typically when people are being arrested and they're asked why they're here, it's either an appeal to authority, and usually it's an authority that isn't even scientific, it is instead political, or it's something like this.
Why are you here?
I'm here to just stop oil. We're here to stop the government from investing in oil and gas projects. We're here for a sustainable future. We're here for an equitable future. We're here to stop Britain burning. I'm here to stop Pakistan drowning.
Or it's, oh, I'm here to save millions and millions and millions of lives. Now, for a start, Britain isn't burning. The average temperature is going up slightly, but it hardly constitutes burning. Now, you may have heard a lot about Pakistan flooding recently, and a lot of people are blaming it on climate change. There's one takeaway I want you to have from this video, it's that global warming and climate change are not the reason that Pakistan is flooding. But you will see typical articles like this from the Washington Post saying climate change worsened Pakistan's devastating flooding, analysis finds, saying that rainfall intensified by 50 to 75% during monsoon season. Now, according to the article, since June, national rainfall amounts have been well above average. Pakistan experienced its wettest July and August on record since 1961. The hardest hit regions were the southern provinces of Sindh and Baluchistan. In August alone, Baluchistan and Sindh received 7 to 8 times the normal rain. So quite clearly this monsoon season was a pretty horrific one. A large amount of rainfall. What is quite funny though is that after the Washington Post explained how they did all the computer modelling and things like this, there is still paragraphs to cover their arse. They found also that having rain in such amounts today has about a 1% chance of happening a year, known as a 1 in 100 year rain event. In the world without climate change, it would have been less likely, said Otto, he says, as a point of definite. Otto emphasised that the findings have large uncertainties because of the difficulty of modelling rainfall in the region. So, when it says 50% to 75% worse, these are still massive error bars, because modelling something as complex as the climate and these events is quite difficult to do, which experiences highly variable rainfall from year to year and numerous factors that can affect the monsoonal rainfall. However, the team's findings agree with recent assessments from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which project more intense rain in the area. But they've been predicting things like this since it started in 1990, so they finally got there 30 years later. Historical weather records and past studies also show the number and frequency of extreme rain events has increased in recent decades. Just to put these paragraphs in other words, there is 1 in 100 chance that you get a monsoon season as bad as we have seen in Pakistan. They have to point that out and then also say, okay, our models might be completely wrong, but they agree with all the other work that's been done predicting an event like this for 30 years. So I put it to you that this looks to me like confirmation bias. And they also call the guy a climate scientist, and you should really call these people climatologists if that's what they actually are. If anyone is called an X or Y scientist, they aren't a scientist as far as I'm concerned. Either that or the Washington Post are really bad at reporting on scientific news. But there was also the claim made that rainfall has intensified over the recent decades. But from data that we can see from the World Bank, we can see that rainfall and precipitation in Pakistan is actually incredibly consistent. I mean, yes, you have all these peaks and troughs, but you expect this in precipitation year on year. But as you can see, the latest data from, say, 2021 is actually quite a low, but in 2020, you had quite the peak, almost the highest year-round precipitation we have seen, and yet we had no floods. Though again, this is likely because this is the highest rainfall in a monsoon season ever recorded in Pakistan, which is fair enough. But still, even when the, as they are called, climate scientists claiming this is climate change, just to blame it on rainfall is ridiculous, because according to the Asian Times, of multiple climate-related challenges, rapid deforestation is one of the gravest issues faced by the country today. Pakistan loses 27,000 hectares of natural forest area annually. At the time of independence, Pakistan's total forest cover was up 33%, and by 2015 it had dropped to 5%. Moreover, in 2010, tree cover in Pakistan was 648,000 hectares, or just 0.74% of total land area. And it gets worse. In 2020, Pakistan lost 69.2 hectares of tree cover, equal to 19.6 kilotons of carbon dioxide emissions. Among the daunting factors that cause deforestation, dependency on firewood, urbanisation and commodity-driven demands are the leading factors. A big chunk of the population, 68%, depends on firewood. From 2001 to 2019, urbanisation and commodity-driven deforestation accounted for 15% of tree cover loss. So even in this article that's going on about deforestation, it still needs to find a way to say this is making climate change worse. Because a lot of people call, like the Amazon and forest the lung of the earth because it reduces carbon dioxide, which isn't true. All it does is store carbon dioxide, and when they die and degrade, they release carbon dioxide again. It is less of a lung of the earth, more of a carbon capture unit. So obviously it's bad for releasing carbon emissions into the atmosphere, but in doing so it also encourages forest growth. So like many things in nature, it's actually quite self-regulatory. So you can try and blame this on the rainfall all you want, but the real reason that this is affecting lives so much worse and there is so much flooding is because forests also act as almost a massive straw to floods. Roots in the ground are what keep the soil stable, and when you're in a flood it's less so much the water that's an issue, and more the fact that if you don't have the vegetation and the roots there to keep the soil in place, then that soil is easily just swept up by the large current of the flood and taken downstream. Whereas if it held with the roots and all that, it would be a hell of a lot better at keeping it in place and reducing the damage that a flood can do. And of course, when you go from 33% of your land being covered in forests to just 5%, you can see why that would be a massive problem. So ideally, you'll want less deforestation. Oddly enough, a really good way to stop people relying on firewood for their heating and cooking is in fact to move them over to fossil fuels, as you can keep your carbon capture units of trees in their lovely large forests covering 33% of your land, and also keep people warm. Like everything these idiots don't understand, that you need to move from using firewood to using coal burners to using oil and gas, and then finally we can start thinking about heating things with solar, wind or nuclear power. Fortunately with Pakistan, they'd rather spend their money on something called the Islamic bomb, which is where most of their nuclear material goes to. Yet people still want to send them money in foreign aid for God knows what reason. Probably because they think they all still live in wood huts. But anyway, I hope I've made my point there. Pakistan is not being flooded just merely due to climate change. It's also because the government can't help but allow the forests of Pakistan to dwindle and die, along with them being constantly chopped down because their people need warmth and somewhere to cook. Anyway, about time I rounded this off, and one thing that I am happy about is Suella Braverman's tweets about information of this incident. Blocking ambulances and fire engines and putting lives in danger is completely indefensible, because there was also news that babies in cars on their way to the hospital were being blocked, but these people don't care. I thank the Met Police, who have arrested over 300 disruptive protesters, this self-defeating organisation, so far this month, and given that they said that only 30 people were in the blockades, I'd love to know where the other 270 came from. I expect the police to use the full powers we have given them to stop those who are hell-bent on disrupting everyone's lives. Our public order bill will strengthen those powers further and toughen the penalties for guerrilla tactics. And quite typically when these people are arrested, they are either let go with a fine, or some people have been known to be in jail for a few months. The problem is they'll be in jail once, they won't care, and they'll go back and do it again. So if jail's not a deterrent, you kind of have to ask, well, what is? Unless it's a case of every time they commit the same crime, the prison sentence goes up, but I doubt that the British court system runs like that. Even though it obviously should. But having said that, these are still protests that are on a smaller scale than Extinction Rebellion, but the problem is that we are now getting more and more offshoots. With Insulate Britain still being a thing, they're just not doing any activism at the moment, and we've also had the new two-man team of Stop UK Private Jets, who think it's a good idea to throw poo over memorials and set their arms on fire. But anyway, I'm sure this won't be the last time I have to report on this type of news, because the climate agenda is only going to ramp up, and if Labour manage to get in 2 years' time, not only will you see an official rubber stamping of absolutely everything to do with the climate agenda, but you will also see these protests getting worse and worse, because these people aren't really protesting for anything in particular. The whole thing with the climate is just window dressing. If they didn't have that, they'd be protesting nuclear weapons because they're afraid that they're going to end the planet. Because it's typically two types of people doing this. People who just want nothing but chaos and just want to cause a ruckus and get the attention that they feel they deserve in life, or it's people who are being led along with good intentions because they genuinely believe that the planet is going to end. So going to jail for a few months, well, what's that compared to me saving the life of literally billions of people? Yeah, when it comes to actually doing anything practical individually, they won't do it beyond, yeah, I don't really drive that many places and I buy organic. But will they do anything like create a solar panel business, get their own wind turbine business, look into how they can improve tidal power or anything like that? No, they will do nothing like that. Because this is the easiest way to have them feel good about themselves, and they can also feel a bit rebellious doing it at the same time. But anyway, that's everything I had for you today, so as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.